Maya Rodriguez stared at the towering crystalline spires of the Vortanian Military Academy and wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake. The acceptance letter had seemed like a dream come true back on Earth. But now, standing in front of what looked like a disco ball designed by aliens with severe architectural issues, she was having second thoughts. Welcome new cadets to the most prestigious military institution in the galaxy. The voice belonged to Commander Vexic, a 7-foot-tall purple creature whose head resembled a cross between a pineapple and a very angry lamp. Here you will learn the ancient and honorable traditions of galactic warfare. Maya glanced around at her fellow cadets. There was Jorik, a rock-like being from the mineral worlds who communicated through a series of grinding sounds that somehow passed for conversation. Next to him stood Zila, a graceful blue-skinned humanoid, whose species apparently evolved from intelligent jellyfish, which explained why she kept swaying even when standing still. Each species brings unique strengths to our brotherhood of warriors, Commander Vexic continued, his voice carrying the enthusiasm of someone who'd given this speech approximately 3,000 times. The crystalline horde provides tactical precision. The Aquatic Federation offers fluid adaptability. The stone clans bring unbreakable resolve. Maya raised her hand. What do humans bring? Commander Vexic paused, his bulbous eyes blinking in what Maya was learning to recognize as the alien equivalent of confusion. Humans, well, you're enthusiastic. The other cadets made various sounds that Maya assumed were polite alien chuckling. Jorik's granite shoulders vibrated slightly, which she'd already learned meant he was either laughing or having a minor earthquake. Right then, Commander Vexic announced, clearly eager to move past the awkward moment. Time for your first lesson in proper military bearing. Everyone assumed the sacred stance of respectful attention. What followed was the most ridiculous display Maya had ever witnessed. Zila immediately began undulating her arms in complicated patterns while humming what sounded like whale song. Jorik somehow managed to stack his rocky appendages into a formation that defied several laws of physics. The other cadets each performed their own species-specific rituals that looked like a cross between yoga and interpretive dance. Maya stood there, arms at her sides, watching this bizarre performance with growing bewilderment. Cadet Rodriguez, Commander Vexic's voice cracked like a whip. Where is your sacred stance? I'm standing at attention, sir. That's not a sacred stance, that's just standing. Yes, sir. That's what we call standing at attention. Commander Vexic's eye stalks twitched dangerously. Maya was beginning to suspect that the next few years were going to be very interesting indeed. 3 weeks into her academy experience, Maya had mastered exactly 0 of the traditional military customs, and somehow managed to accidentally violate at least 17 sacred protocols. Apparently, eating with her hands during the ceremonial Feast of Valor was considered barbaric, even though the alternative involved using what looked like a combination between chopsticks and medieval torture devices. The proper way to consume the sacred nutrition paste, Instructor Blacksnod explained with infinite patience, is to first perform the ritual of grateful acknowledgement, then slowly absorb the nutrients through your secondary breathing apparatus. Maya stared at the gray slime that constituted breakfast. I don't have a secondary breathing apparatus. Then how do you properly honor your food? Usually by not throwing it up. The mess hall fell silent. Even Jorik stopped his granite grinding chatter. Maya was learning that her fellow cadets found human directness both fascinating and terrifying, like watching someone pet a wild tiger while making casual conversation about the weather. But it wasn't just the instructors who were becoming a problem. Word had reached the upper echelons of the academy about the human cadet who couldn't perform a simple sacred stance, and apparently, this had attracted the attention of someone Maya really didn't want to meet. General Krexler was a legend among the Vortanian military. 3 meters tall, covered in ceremonial scars that told the story of a dozen victorious campaigns, and possessing the kind of presence that made seasoned warriors check their posture. He'd personally led the charge against the Void Seekers, crushed the rebellion of the Crimson Moons, and once stared down an entire fleet of enemy ships until they surrendered out of sheer intimidation. He was also, Maya was discovering, a complete and utter traditionalist who viewed humans as barely evolved primates. So this is the primitive that cannot master basic military courtesy, General Krexler announced during his surprise inspection of Maya's tactical theory class. His voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. Maya looked up from her datapad, where she'd been redesigning what she considered a fundamentally flawed battle formation. General, sir. Just trying to understand why we'd advance in a straight line when the enemy clearly has superior firepower positioning. The classroom atmosphere could have been cut with a plasma sword. Her classmates suddenly found their own datapads absolutely fascinating. Even Zila stopped her constant swaying. General Krexler's 4 arms crossed in a gesture that somehow managed to convey both authority and contempt. These formations have been perfected over millennia of honorable warfare, Cadet. They represent the accumulated wisdom of civilizations far older than your species. With respect, sir, accumulated wisdom that gets you killed is just accumulated stupidity with better marketing. If the classroom had been quiet before, it now achieved a level of silence that suggested everyone had simultaneously stopped breathing. Maya realized she might have pushed things a bit too far, but honestly, someone had to point out that marching directly into enemy crossfire wasn't tactics, it was assisted suicide with extra steps. General Krexthor stepped closer, his towering frame casting a shadow over Maya's desk. Perhaps the human needs a lesson in proper respect for authority. The next day's tactical exercise was designed to be a simple formation drill. Basic stuff really. Move your units from point A to point B without getting them all killed. The kind of thing that should have been easy for fourth-year cadets, except the scenario was so fundamentally flawed that Maya couldn't keep her mouth shut. "Sir," Maya called out as the simulation began showing predictable disaster. "Permission to speak freely?" General Krexthor, who had personally taken over the exercise to observe the problematic human, didn't even look up from his command display. "Permission denied. Execute the formation as ordered." Maya watched as the simulated forces marched directly into what was obviously a trap. The enemy had high ground, superior positioning, and had clearly been given time to prepare defensive positions. The prescribed formation was sending troops through a narrow valley with no cover, no alternate routes, and no supporting fire. It was less a military strategy and more a recipe for wholesale slaughter. "General, with respect, we're walking into a kill zone. If we just modified the approach angle by 30 degrees and used the ridgeline for cover." Cadet Rodriguez. General Krexthor's voice carried the kind of cold authority that had made enemy commanders surrender before the first shot was fired. "You will execute the formation as prescribed or you will be removed from this exercise." The simulation continued. Maya watched as virtual soldiers died in droves, cut down by an enemy who didn't even have to work for their victory. Around her, fellow cadets shifted uncomfortably. Even they could see the massacre unfolding, but none dared question the general's authority. "This is insane," Maya muttered, just loud enough to be heard. "We're not training soldiers, we're training cannon fodder." The command center went dead silent. Every eye turned toward Maya, who stood there realizing she'd just crossed a line that probably shouldn't have been crossed. But honestly, watching good soldiers die for the sake of tradition was making her physically ill. General Krexthor slowly turned around. His massive frame seemed to fill the entire room, and his eyes held the kind of cold fury that had made him legendary across the galaxy. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper, which somehow made it infinitely more terrifying. "What did you just say?" Maya felt her heart hammering against her ribs, but she'd come too far to back down now. "I said this strategy is insane, sir. We're sending troops to die for no tactical advantage. Any competent enemy would do exactly what this simulation is doing, and our people would be slaughtered." "Our people?" General Krexthor's forearms spread wide in a gesture of mock amazement. "These are not your people, human. These are warriors with thousands of years of honored tradition. Your species was still throwing rocks at each other when mine were mastering the art of war. Then maybe you should have learned something better than how to die gloriously." The words hung in the air like a live grenade. Maya knew she'd gone too far, but she was tired of watching incompetence disguised as honor. She was tired of being treated like a primitive just because her species was new to the galactic stage. Most of all, she was tired of being expected to smile and nod while people died for stupid reasons. General Krexthor moved faster than something his size should have been able to move. 3 quick steps brought him directly in front of Maya, his massive form looming over her like a living mountain. His voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the room. "You dare question the wisdom of your betters? You arrogant, primitive little." The slap came without warning. General Krexthor's massive hand struck Maya across the face with enough force to send her stumbling backward. The sound echoed through the command center like a gunshot, followed by absolute silence. Maya touched her cheek, feeling the sting of the blow and the warm trickle of blood from her split lip. Around her, the other cadets stared in shock. Even by alien standards, striking a cadet was crossing a serious line. But General Krexthor was a war hero, a legend, and Maya was just a troublemaking human who'd pushed too far. For a moment, Maya stood there, processing what had just happened. Then she looked up at General Krexthor, and when she spoke, her voice was perfectly calm. "Thank you, sir, that was very educational." General Krexthor's eyes narrowed. "Perhaps now you understand your place, cadet." Maya wiped the blood from her lip and smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. "Oh, I understand perfectly now, General. The question is, do you understand yours?" The news of the incident spread through the academy faster than a reactor breach. By evening, everyone knew that the human cadet had been struck by General Krexther himself, and opinions were divided on whether Maya was incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Most leaned towards stupid. Maya found herself alone in the Academy's archives, researching everything she could about military protocols and cadet rights. Turns out, striking a cadet was technically against regulations, but filing a complaint against a war hero like General Krexther was career suicide. The system was designed to protect the hierarchy, not the cadets. Researching how to file a grievance. The voice belonged to Cadet Nixara, a snake-like serpentine whose species was known for their strategic thinking and political cunning. I wouldn't recommend it. Maya looked up from her datapad. Why not? Because you'll lose and then you'll be expelled for making false accusations against a superior officer. Nixara's forked tongue flickered in what Maya had learned was the equivalent of a sardonic smile. But there might be another way. I'm listening. Nixara settled into the chair across from Maya, her coils arranging themselves with practiced grace. Have you heard of the trial of supreme command? Maya shook her head. It's an ancient tradition, older than the Academy itself. A simulation so complex and challenging that it's considered the ultimate test of military genius. In theory, any cadet can request to attempt it, but in practice, it's academic suicide. Why? Because nobody passes. The scenario is designed to be impossible. Perfect tactical knowledge, flawless execution, and supernatural luck might get you a 30% survival rate. Most cadets who attempt it don't break 10%. Maya frowned. What's the point of an impossible test? Originally, to identify the truly exceptional commanders. The kind who could pull victory from the jaws of defeat through pure brilliance. But it's been decades since anyone even attempted it, and over a century since anyone came close to passing. What happens if someone does pass? Nixara's eyes gleamed with something that might have been amusement. Academic legend says they receive the highest honors the Academy can bestow. More importantly, they gain the right to publicly challenge any decision made by Academy leadership, including disciplinary actions. Maya sat back in her chair, mind racing. So if I passed this trial, I could formally challenge what happened today. If you passed, you could do whatever you wanted. The Academy would have to acknowledge you as one of the greatest tactical minds in galactic history. Nixara paused, her tongue flickering again. But Maya, you have to understand, this isn't just difficult. It's designed to break the spirit of anyone arrogant enough to attempt it. The simulation adapts to counter every strategy you employ. It learns your patterns, exploits your weaknesses, and systematically destroys everything you try to accomplish. What's the scenario? Fleet Command. You're given a small task force and ordered to defend a civilian evacuation against overwhelming enemy forces. The enemy outnumbers you 5-1, has superior technology, knows the terrain better than you do, and has had time to prepare. Your job is to hold them off long enough for the evacuation to complete, then extract your forces intact. Maya whistled softly. How long does the evacuation take? 6 hours. The previous record holder lasted 43 minutes before his entire fleet was destroyed. And General Krexther knows about this trial. Every officer in the Academy knows about it. It's considered the holy grail of military achievement. Krexther himself attempted it as a cadet and managed to last an impressive hour and 17 minutes before being completely annihilated. Maya felt a slow smile spreading across her face. So if I requested to attempt this trial, he couldn't refuse. Technically. No. But Maya, you have to understand what you'd be walking into. This isn't just about proving a point. The simulation is designed by the greatest military minds in galactic history. It's been refined and perfected for centuries. You're talking about going up against the accumulated tactical knowledge of dozens of species, all working together to create an unwinnable scenario. Has anyone ever tried anything unconventional? What do you mean? I mean, have all the attempts followed traditional military doctrine? Honorable warfare, established tactics, that sort of thing? Nixara's head tilted thoughtfully. Well, yes. The trial is administered by the Academy's most senior officers. They expect cadets to demonstrate mastery of classical military theory. So everyone who's attempted it has played by the same rules. Of course. It's a test of military competence, not. Nixara trailed off, her eyes widening as she realized where Maya's thoughts were heading. Oh no, Maya, you're not thinking what I think you're thinking. Maya's smile widened. I'm thinking that maybe the reason nobody's passed this test is because they're all trying to win the wrong way. The Academy will never accept unorthodox tactics. They're looking for proof that you've mastered their methods, not that you can invent new ones. Are they? Or are they looking for someone who can actually win? Nixara stared at her for a long moment, then began laughing. It was a sound like wind chimes in a hurricane. You're absolutely insane. But if you're really going to do this, you should know that the trial is conducted in front of the entire senior staff. Every instructor, every administrator, and every visiting dignitary gets to watch. It's treated as a formal academic event, including General Krexther. Especially General Krexther. He makes a point of attending every attempt, presumably to watch young cadets learn humility. Maya stood up, her decision made. Then I guess it's time for the general to learn something new. The grand simulation chamber was packed. Word had spread through the academy like wildfire that the troublesome human cadet was actually going to attempt the trial of supreme command. Faculty members who hadn't attended one of these events in decades suddenly found their schedules clear. Even cadets from other years had managed to find excuses to be present. General Krexther sat in the place of honor, his forearms crossed and his expression radiating smug satisfaction. This was going to be educational for everyone involved, especially the arrogant human who thought she could challenge millennia of military wisdom. Maya walked into the simulation pod, ignoring the whispers and stares from the assembled crowd. The chamber was a marvel of technology, capable of creating tactical scenarios so realistic that participants often forgot they were in a simulation. As the systems initialized around her, Maya found herself standing on the bridge of the TSS Defiance, a standard Terran-class cruiser. Cadet Rodriguez, came the voice of Admiral Vorthek, the Academy's senior tactical instructor. You are Fleet Commander Maya Rodriguez. Your task force consists of 1 heavy cruiser, 2 destroyers and 4 frigates. You are tasked with defending Evacuation Point Gamma while civilian transports complete their departure. The enemy fleet will arrive in 30 minutes. You have that long to prepare your defense. Maya looked at her tactical display and immediately understood why this scenario was considered impossible. 7 ships against 35. No reinforcements. No retreat. No way to win using conventional tactics. Which was perfect, because Maya had no intention of fighting conventionally. Computer, display detailed sensor readings of the evacuation point. The holographic display showed a standard defensive setup, civilian ships clustered around a space station with her military vessels positioned in a protective formation. It was textbook defensive positioning, which was exactly the problem. Computer, are there any restrictions on the types of tactics I can employ? Negative, Commander. All tactics within the bounds of simulated technology are permitted. Maya grinned. Time to show these aliens what human creativity looked like when all the rules went out the airlock. All ships, this is Commander Rodriguez. Prepare for immediate redeployment. We're not defending this position. In the observation chamber, General Krexther leaned forward with interest. Moving away from the civilians was either brilliant or completely insane, and he was betting on insane. Frigate Squadron Alpha, I want you to execute a micro-jump to coordinates. Maya rattled off a series of numbers that placed her fastest ships in what appeared to be completely random positions. Begin broadcasting on all frequencies. I want you to sound like a full battle fleet. The simulation's AI began adapting to Maya's strategy, but it was designed to counter conventional military thinking. What Maya was doing didn't match any known tactical doctrine. Destroyer Squadron, prepare for Operation Crazy Ivan. We're going to use the asteroid field as a slingshot. Commander, her simulated tactical officer reported, that maneuver is extremely dangerous. The gravitational stress could tear the ships apart. Only if we do it wrong. Calculate a trajectory that uses the asteroid field's gravitational pull to accelerate us to 0.8 light speed. We're going to punch through their formation before they know what hit them. In the observation chamber, Admiral Vorthek was frantically checking his instruments. What is she doing? This isn't how fleet tactics work. Maya's heavy cruiser, along with her remaining destroyer, launched into the asteroid field at full speed. The simulation's AI, expecting her to engage in a traditional defensive action, had positioned the enemy fleet for a standard assault. They weren't prepared for 2 ships to come screaming out of an asteroid field at near light speed. All ships, execute pattern Omega 7. I want every torpedo we have loaded with proximity sensors. We're not aiming for their ships, we're aiming for their formation. The first wave of enemy ships arrived at the evacuation point to find nothing. The civilians were gone, the station was empty, and the defensive fleet had vanished. Before they could react, Maya's frigates dropped their electronic warfare jamming. Surprise, Maya muttered as her torpedo spread detonated in a carefully orchestrated pattern. Not to destroy ships, but to create a sensor-disrupting debris field that made it impossible for the enemy to coordinate their attack. What the hell is she doing? General Krexler demanded, his composure finally cracking. Maya's cruiser and destroyer emerged from the asteroid field like avenging angels, moving at speeds that should have been impossible for ships that size. Instead of engaging the enemy fleet directly, they punched through the formation, launching every missile they had at the enemy command ship. Computer, redirect all power from life support and artificial gravity to the weapons systems. We won't need them where we're going. Her tactical officer looked puzzled. Commander, that's a violation of standard safety protocols. Standard safety protocols assume we're planning to survive this engagement. We're not. We're planning to win it. The enemy command ship, suddenly finding itself under concentrated fire from two ships moving at impossible speeds, began to break apart. But Maya wasn't done. All ships, execute the Kessel Run. We're going to thread the needle between their remaining formation and the evacuation point's gravity well. Use the enemy's own ships as cover. What followed was the most insane display of tactical thinking anyone in the Academy had ever witnessed. Maya's ships danced through the enemy formation like leaves in a hurricane, using the enemy's own vessels as shields while picking off targets of opportunity. Every time the AI adapted to her strategy, she changed tactics completely. Frigate Squadron, I want you to ram the enemy flagship. But before you do, eject all your escape pods directly at their sensor array. Commander, that's suicide. No, that's misdirection. They'll waste time trying to rescue what they think are survivors while you deliver your real payload. The simulation's AI was having what could only be described as a nervous breakdown. Every tactical algorithm it employed was met with a human response that made no sense according to military doctrine but somehow worked perfectly. Maya's ships continued their chaotic dance through the enemy formation. When conventional weapons failed, she used debris as projectiles. When the enemy adapted to her movement patterns, she began flying in formations that violated basic physics by exploiting quirks in the simulation's programming. Computer, what's the status of the civilian evacuation? Evacuation complete, Commander. All civilian vessels have successfully jumped to hyperspace. Excellent. Now we just need to get out of here alive. Which was when Maya played her final card. Instead of trying to fight her way out through the remaining enemy ships, she did something that had never been attempted in the history of the Trial of Supreme Command. All remaining ships, prepare for emergency jump. We're going to use the enemy's own gravity well to slingshot us into hyperspace. Commander, that's impossible. The gravitational stress will tear us apart. Only if we do it wrong. Trust me. Maya's remaining ships dove directly toward the largest enemy vessel, using its mass to accelerate them beyond the normal safety parameters for hyperspace entry. The enemy, expecting her to pull away at the last second, were caught completely off guard when her ships vanished into hyperspace from point-blank range. The simulation chamber fell silent. For the first time in over a century, the Trial of Supreme Command was complete. Not only had Maya successfully defended the evacuation point, she had done it while preserving 70% of her fleet and eliminating over half the enemy forces. The silence stretched for a full minute before someone in the observation chamber began to applaud. Then another. Within moments, the entire chamber was thundering with approval, except for one figure who sat frozen in his chair. General Krexler stared at the tactical display, his forearms hanging limp at his sides. Everything he thought he knew about warfare had just been turned upside down by a human cadet who had refused to play by the rules. Maya stepped out of the simulation pod, her face flushed with adrenaline and triumph. She looked directly at General Krexler and smiled. So, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber, are we going to talk about those traditional formations now? The silence that followed Maya's question was the kind that happens when an entire room full of people simultaneously realizes they've witnessed something that will be talked about for decades. Admiral Vorthak was the first to recover, his voice slightly shaky as he made the official announcement. Cadet Rodriguez has successfully completed the Trial of Supreme Command with a 94% mission success rate. He paused, checking his instruments again as if he couldn't believe the numbers. This is the highest score in the trial's recorded history. The applause that erupted was thunderous, but Maya kept her eyes fixed on General Krexler. The war hero sat frozen in his chair staring at the tactical display that showed the complete dismantling of what had been considered an unwinnable scenario. General, Maya called out, her voice cutting through the noise. I believe there's a tradition that needs to be observed. Every eye in the chamber turned to General Krexler. The ancient protocols were clear. Anyone who passed the Trial of Supreme Command was entitled to recognition from the highest-ranking officer present. In this case, that meant General Krexler himself had to formally acknowledge Maya's achievement. Slowly, like a mountain deciding to relocate, General Krexler rose from his chair. His massive frame seemed somehow diminished as he walked across the chamber to where Maya stood. When he reached her, he stopped, his forearms hanging at his sides. The tradition, he said quietly, requires me to present you with a symbol of military excellence. His hands moved to his chest, where dozens of medals and commendations decorated his uniform. He selected the highest honor among them, the Star of Galactic Valor, awarded for exceptional courage in the face of impossible odds. General Krexler held the medal for a moment, then slowly pinned it to Maya's academy uniform. Congratulations, Cadet Rodriguez. You have achieved something that many considered impossible. Maya looked down at the medal, then back up at the general. When she spoke, her voice was loud enough for everyone in the chamber to hear. Thank you, General. I have to say, this has been quite an educational experience. She paused, letting the word educational hang in the air with all its implications. I've learned that sometimes the difference between wisdom and stupidity isn't age or experience. It's the willingness to admit when you're wrong. The chamber was so quiet you could have heard a pin drop in vacuum. Maya continued, her tone conversational but carrying an edge that could cut steel. I've learned that honor without effectiveness is just elaborate suicide. That tradition without adaptation is just a slow path to extinction. And most importantly, I've learned that the moment you stop questioning your assumptions is the moment you stop being a soldier and start being a monument to your own arrogance. General Krexler's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. But I've also learned, Maya said, her voice softening slightly, that there are warriors worth respecting in this galaxy. People who fought real battles, faced real dangers, and earned their positions through blood and sacrifice. The problem isn't with warriors like that. The problem is when those warriors forget that the point of fighting is to win, not to look good while losing. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of cadets and instructors alike. Every species here has something valuable to contribute to the art of war. The crystalline horde's precision, the aquatic federation's adaptability, the stone clan's determination. Even humans have something to offer, apparently. A few chuckles rippled through the audience. But the moment we start believing that our way is the only way, we stop learning. And the moment we stop learning, we start dying. Maya's eyes returned to General Krexler. I hope today's lesson was as educational for everyone else as it was for me. General Krexler stared at her for a long moment, then did something that surprised everyone in the chamber. He smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile, but it was genuine. Indeed it was, Cadet Rodriguez. Indeed it was. He stepped back and rendered a perfect military salute. I believe you have a bright future ahead of you in the galactic military. Maya returned the salute, then added with just a hint of her old sarcasm, let's just hope the galactic military is ready for it. As the crowd began to disperse, buzzing with excitement about what they'd witnessed, Maya caught sight of Nixera slithering over to her. So the serpentine cadet said, her forked tongue flickering with amusement. What's next for the human who broke the unbreakable test? Maya looked at the medal on her chest, then out the chamber's viewport at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, the galaxy was full of conflicts that needed solving, enemies that needed defeating, and probably a whole lot of military traditions that needed a good hard look in the mirror. Next, Maya grinned. Next, I graduate. And then I show the galaxy what happens when you give a human an actual fleet to command. She paused, her grin widening. Something tells me it's going to be very interesting.